This is called The Disenchantress. And here's another thing I want to tell you about. The other night, I was listening to this story on the radio about meteors. Meteors, it turns out, they are distinct from comets in that they, quote, seldom grow any larger than the size of a grape or a raisin, etc., etc. Well, I turned off the radio when I heard that because I don't much care for science, generally speaking, mostly because I don't understand it. For instance, I once got a C on a pop quiz because I left out Pluto from the list of planets in our solar system. Sometime back when they announced that Pluto was no longer a planet is right around the time I stopped believing in science. So I turned off the radio, like I said, and I started to read about the French existentialist Albert Camus instead. But Camus, it turns out, he didn't think very highly of science himself. And he felt instead that our behavior should be guided by those 3 or 4 times in our lives when our hearts open up before a stranger, say. Or, as he so tenderly puts it, before the benign indifference of the entire universe, which may or may not be the same thing. It isn't clear. Well, I don't much care for people to tell me what to do with my heart, so I closed up that book also, and I started to read about the French novelist Henri Beyle, aka Stendhal, instead. Stendhal, it turns out, didn't much care for strangers or science, or even for the people close to him very much, except with the exception of his mother, who he describes sometimes in erotic terms bordering on obsession. For example, Stendhal will say things like, "All my cannons are firm and loaded in the presence of my mother's bosoms, which I wish were bare." A statement that I gather is pretty witty and profound, although I'm not too sure what it means exactly. Well, anyway, I don't much care for wittiness or cleverness and all that much myself, especially not when it's somebody else's. So I closed up that book also, and I dashed off to the nearest bookshop of all places to look for a new one, or at least to get some air. Sometimes I get so cooped up I feel I can hardly breathe. And so anyway, the bookseller at this particular shop, she didn't much care for strangers or a whole lot else either, it seems, because when I asked her for a great book recommendation, she just went on gobbling down mouthful after mouthful of cranberries or raisins, or maybe they were sardines for all I know, without so much as a glance in my direction. And then she finally said, "And what's a great book to you?" And I admit I was at a loss for how to answer this question, so it's a good thing that she went right on talking as if nobody had interrupted her. 2 things you should ask a book, chomp chomp, or a stranger, chomp chomp, she's eating something, or a potential house pet even, upon first meeting them. 1, can they walk? 2, can they dance? And upon completing this lofty discourse, the young lady, she tossed what looked to be one stray and slimy sardine far up into the air, and then caught it swiftly between her teeth, looking quite pleased with herself in the bargain. And I could swear to you that she looked just like a raisin when she smiled and curled up back into herself this way. "Yes, yes," I said, "I couldn't agree with you more. How clever. Bravo. I have often felt that way myself." But she didn't look particularly amused by this remark, and in fact she went on right on talking again, as if I wasn't even there. "A book," she said, "should be made in such a way that if you throw it at the window, it will shatter into 1,000 pieces. The window, that is, not the book, which should replace it." "Yes, yes," I said, "of course, how clever. Bravo. I often think something similar myself. A book, I often say, should be like a cannon fired straight at the chest of the reader. Lay bare my mother's bosom, as they say. Not sure why." "At the window," she exclaimed, horrified. "The book should be aimed at the window." "Yes, yes, of course, quite right, at the window. That's exactly what I meant. Naturally, at the window." And then perhaps because of our unspoken distaste for the words of Stendhal, or else perhaps from the sexual tension that was undeniably boiling up at this point between us, well, I decided to tell the lady just how eloquent and smart I thought she was. How she was the kind of stranger that one meets, say, 3 or 4 times in one's life, if one's lucky. To which she promptly replied, and I won't soon forget these words, "Oh, everything out of my mouth is complete and utter horseshit, and you'd do better off with your books." And then I told her how much this idea made sense to me also. Quite right, I said. How often I have felt that way myself. Sometimes I think, I said, that if someone were to submit my private thoughts to the law, I should be hanged 10 times a day, maybe more. And this she must have recognized right away was another line from Stendhal, because she seemed rather amused by this, and one can tell about such things. And nevertheless, she sat for a while in absolute silence, probably to remind me of our shared distaste for cleverness, and for words in general. And I must admit, I was so touched by this silence that I was even tempted to give in to her tenderness right then and there, until it occurred to me all of a sudden that perhaps I'd better not make things so easy for her, and that I should leave her with something to think about, as they say, instead. And so I left that bookshop also, and it might sound crazy to you, but I saw the image of that girl everywhere along my way home. The image of a perfect stranger, you might say. And as I walked along the street, I loosened up my collar and I looked up to the stars. You remember to do that sort of thing when you can breathe again. And I thought how remarkable and strange it is that something the size of a grape or a raisin can sometimes light up the whole sky.